Can I put it under your binder, or should I?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Super. Thank you.
And I'm putting you sort of up. Like I'm going to do an opening reading and then Shviti, and then a few more.
Are you going to
things.
say anything about it first? You're going to say You're going to say, I don't know.
Yeah, I can read. Maybe I'll read the translation.
Cool.
And then I'm still just going to read Psalm 23.
It's like 8-point.
I have really good vision.
I guess so.
And then this felt like.
I love Mary Oliver.
I know.
And I've heard you do this before, right?
No, I've never done this one
Oh my
before.
God, I don't. Yeah, I
But
don't
if-
even want to. No, I'm glad.
Felt like the proximity of deaths.
What's going on with Anna? Are they still stranded? In New York still? Poor baby. They're boarding. Oh, in D.C. So they must be opening the airport.
In the Jewish community, when we learn of the death of a loved one, we offer words of blessing. They are difficult words to say, but important nonetheless. They recognize that as much as we know about life, as much as we think we understand, there is still so much that we do not understand, that will be beyond us, that is in the hands of God. If you'll repeat after me, Baruch, Atah, Adonai, Dayan, Ha'emet. Blessed are you, O God, Judge of truth. Adonai Natan, Adonai Lekach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach. God has given, God has taken. Blessed be the name of God. When we have suffered a great loss, the fabric of our lives is torn. What was once a whole and beautiful fabric now has a hole in it. And our response to loss is highly individual. Some of us feel terrible pain. Some may feel numb. Some may feel a certain relief at the end of a painful time. Some may feel guilt. Or some feel a lump in the throat at words unsaid. Some may find it impossible to cry, and others will find it impossible to stop crying. Our tradition makes room for all expressions of grief. Our sages teach us there is no wrong way to grieve. And they taught us to be gentle with the grieving. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel taught, there are 3 ways to mourn. The first is to cry. The second is to grow silent. The third is to transform sorrow into song. So whether you are crying or silent or transforming your sorrow to song, know that whatever you are feeling is exactly right. From Psalm 16, I'm ever mindful to the Eternal's presence. God is at my right hand, I shall never be shaken. So my heart rejoices, my whole being exalts, and my body rests secure. For you will not abandon me to Sheol, or let your faithful ones see the pit. You will teach me the path of life. In your presence is perfect joy. The lights are ever in your hand. And so we raise those words in song, Shviti Adonai.
Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid ki mimini balemot lachen samach libi vayagel kvodi af besari ishkon lavetach ki lo tazov nafshi lishol lo titen chasidcha lirot shachat tudini orach chaim orach chaim sovas machut et panecha neimot b'mincha netzach shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid ki mimini
not only because of the proximity of their deaths, but because of the words that Mary Oliver shared, it feels appropriate to read her poem, When Death Comes. When death comes, like the hungry bear in autumn, when death comes and takes all the bright coins from his purse to buy me and snaps the purse shut, when death comes like the measlepox, when death comes like an iceberg between the shoulder blades, I want to step through the door full of curiosity, wondering what is it going to be like, that cottage of darkness. And therefore I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood. And I look upon time as no more than an idea. And I consider eternity as another possibility. And I think of each life as a flower, as common as a field daisy, and as singular. And each name, a comfortable music in the mouth, tending, as all music does, towards silence. And each body a lion of courage and something precious to the earth. When it's over, I want to say all my life I was a bride married to amazement. I was the bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I have made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world. The words of Psalm 23. Adonai roi lo achsar, binot deshe yerbatseni alme menuchot yanhileni. Nafshi yoshvev yanheni b'magale tzedek lama'an shemo. Gam ki elech begeit salmavet, lo ira ra ki ata imadi. Shiftecha umishantecha, he maya nachamuni ta'aruch lefanai shulchan neged sorarai, dishanta b'shemen roshi kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yamei chayai, v'shavti bevet Adonai le'orech yamim. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. When dying is over, a different kind of memory takes over. Not the memory that is obituary, not the memory that records the past indiscriminately, but an active memory that sifts through the ashes of the past to retrieve isolated moments and that give heart to the future. That memory is an act of resurrection. It raises up from oblivious the glories of forgotten years, even the memories of failure, the recollections of frustration and regret are precious. Broken memories are like the tablets Moses shattered, placed lovingly in the holy ark of remembrance. Memories are saved, those immaterial, disembodied ghosts that endure. What is life after death? Pointers, ensigns, marking places that raise us up to life and give us a changed heart. Perhaps a life lived differently, better, wiser, stronger than before. What is left after death? The life of the survivor. And so now we take some time to share reflections for members of David's family to talk about those memories, to talk about those stories, to help us understand and see the man, the person, the son, the brother that David is and was. Rosalie, John.
Thank you all for coming. It really means a lot to us. And as difficult as this is, I'm going to try because it's my chance to tell you about my son, whom I love so much and who was such a unique, kind, talented, and incredible, wonderful person. David started piano lessons in second grade, but never left the piano again. He would practice through dinner if we'd let him. When he got his first electric bass in sixth grade, same thing, practicing scales for hours at a time. I have one particularly fond memory of riding in the car with, I think he was about 9 years old, nine-year-old David in the back seat, and he says, "Hey Ma, did you ever notice that Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is in 3/4 time on the verses and 4/4 time on the refrain?" And I went, no. And I thought, here's my 9-year-old kid telling me, who's a musician, something about my music from the Beatles. I mean, really. 20 years ago at David's bar mitzvah, after bar mitzvah at our house, he absolutely brightened the life of his grandpa, Henry, Ron's dad, once a professional pianist himself, by playing piano and bass duets on old standards from Grandpa Henry's time. And there certainly wasn't a dry eye in the house. David met Abe right here at TBE as members of Shir Hadash, the Temple Youth Band and Choir, which Annie and I started when they were in 7th and 9th grade. Those two boys, they were boys, clicked from the start, composing everything from settings of prayers to far out takes on Jewish and non-Jewish music. Thanks forever to Annie for recognizing their talents and giving them the freedom to compose, arrange, and explore. From Shir Hadash to their band Cesspool was a small step. David's musical interests were wide-ranging. He could share with me and revel in Bach and in Beethoven's string quartets. Then he could scream through number sequences with Cesspool or help me figure out the chords for children's songs. A wonderful way, in particular, that my son drove me crazy was he would be playing the piano and he would play some extremely unstable, diminished chord with suspensions, and then he would walk away from the piano without resolving it. And that was very David, because I needed the chords resolved, but I wasn't going to get them. Okay. David was always a very serious student, perhaps not with his schoolwork, but with anything that piqued his interest. I can picture him and David Barr at age 4, pacing up and down, debating perhaps video game strategy, looking honestly like Talmudic scholars lost in deep thought. Anything David read, he remembered. At age 10, on family vacations in Yellowstone, he taught our traveling families a new card game that he'd read about back home in Hoyle's Rules of Games. It was just like David that he could read through a dry book of facts or rules and envision that a certain game would really be fun and interesting. And he remembered the rules weeks later without Hoyle in his hand. As an adult, his musicianship took a seriously academic turn as he worked on the most minute components of music, creating sounds on his computer that he knew no one would be able to listen to, but which fascinated him nonetheless. The book collection in his apartment showed his wide-ranging interests as an adult, myriad aspects of music, philosophy, Marxism, gender studies, environmentalism, and more, all with very serious notes in the margins. David was one of the kindest, most gentle people I have ever known. As his dear friend Crystal wrote, perhaps he was too kind for this harsh world. He was always willing to give money to people on the street or in the subway, even though he barely had any himself. If he spoke to you, he looked at you with those big brown eyes, looking right into your soul and wanting to know everything about you. He could be a pesky little brother at times, but David and Sarah literally always got along. Very major blessing for a parent. Although they seemed different on the surface, they knew that they were very similar people on the inside. Around Sarah's bat mitzvah, she asked us to get a second pierced hole in her ear, and we did not like the idea. But then David came to lobby for his sister. He told us that's what Sarah wanted, and that he was going to buy that for her bat mitzvah gift. And we were, of course, swayed by his advocacy. David was always sympathetic to the needs and troubles of other people. My memories of David visiting my aging mom, wheeling her down to Riverside Park, playing the piano and singing to her are some of the sweetest. It's no surprise that someone like David had lifelong friendships, especially with Abe and Jared and many others. He loved and respected John as a brother right from the start. And David was always his own guy. In first grade, he had a white sock on the left foot and a black one on the right, and he kept that up for years. His third grade teacher met me out in the parking lot one day and said, "Heed my warning, Rosalie, community high." Susan Lake, true story. And she was right. She was right. If there were 3 ways to answer a question, David came up with number 4 and number 5. Each time he went to play at solo ensemble, it required testing the rules. Once it was a jazz version of Summertime, played pizzicato on the cello. Another time, an original composition played on piano. Another time, an original composition attempted on an acoustic bass guitar, which they threw out. Thinking and acting out of the box was his modus operandi. At community high school, he did have the freedom to spend most of his time playing jazz improv and the rest of the time writing philosophical prose and poetry. Even in death, David's kindness and empathy showed through. He made sure that we knew he loved us with all his being and that he knew he was loved in return. The pull towards suicide was a force which haunted him until he could no longer resist. I know that nobody knows what to say. It's just so hard to grasp that even though we can't see him, that we can see him in our thoughts and feel him in our hearts. We can't touch him or talk to him, and that there are no future stories or new memories. But we are sure that David would not have ended his life unless he was sure he really needed to. He had many dear friends and family who loved him, and he knew it, but there was just something that didn't let him go on. So we can only hope he has found the peace he desired and is in a better place. We will miss him and we will love him always. Thank you.
Dave was an extraordinary person. He was brilliant and gifted, but modest and unassuming. He brought exceptional talent and exuberance into the world and an incredible devotion to music. Most of all, he brought kindness and endless love for his family and friends, love you could feel in his warm, tight hugs. Dave's life was far too short, but he lived it with unmatched passion. Simply put, he went hard at everything. He didn't just write music and play it. He would stay up for days at a time to make it perfect. He immersed himself in books to feed an insatiable curiosity about many topics. As a kid, he loved trains and animals, as many children do. But young David would sit at the Brookline Village T-stop for hours at a time, watching those Green Line trolleys go by. He once spent an entire afternoon sitting with his dad at the Shedd Aquarium in Chicago, staring at the beluga whales. As a young child, he developed an encyclopedic knowledge of wildlife by reading species cards from the World Wildlife Fund. Throughout his adult life, he carried with him both the cards and the knowledge. He had a fascination with people and could relate to seemingly anyone. He loved learning about new things and hearing what makes people tick. His enthusiasm and energy were infectious. He was open and affirming and didn't judge people. Dave made me a better person. He showed me how to be more tender and accepting. Dave's love of adventure and his keen sense of humor made him the life of many parties. His jokes, parodies, and clever Halloween costumes were amazing, especially the ones that were a bit obscure and maybe pushed the envelope a bit. For example, one year he dressed up as the ghost of the late Chief Justice Rehnquist, not long after Chief Justice Rehnquist had passed away. In another star performance, he ended a band competition in Detroit by skateboarding off the stage while playing his electric bass. That evening ended with a trip to the emergency room and a lively discussion with his father over whether he had exercised good judgment when he careened into the crowd. He loved sharing his affinity for all kinds of music. I still sing songs Dave put on mix CDs that he made for me and Sarah when we took a road trip together after our freshman year in college. Dave was always eager to discuss our favorite music and our favorite composers. He taught us things we never knew about Bach and the Beatles, and he broadened our musical horizons with his and Abe's own music at cesspool shows in Ann Arbor and in New York. 10 years ago, we took a family trip to northern Sweden, where we traveled hut to hut on cross-country skis 200 miles north of the Arctic Circle. David hadn't spent more than an hour or two on cross-country skis in his life. But of course, he was at the front of the pack, his enthusiasm making up for his rough technique. Of course, Dave brought music staff paper on the trip, because why not? And at the end of our adventure, Dave and I wrote a song about the trip, and we performed it for the whole group with our Swedish guides. Dave was everything Sarah could have asked for in a little brother. As children, they played together and never fought. They went to the same camps and shared many wonderful family vacations. As adults, he always kept in touch with Sarah and me and supported us, especially when we faced adversity. Sarah and David lived different lives, but they shared many wonderful traits. The thing I treasure most is how they've brought warmth, harmony, and kindness to the people around them. I've never met anyone else who can replicate their tender, calm presence and positive demeanor. Sarah and I have 2 young children, a 3.5-year-old son named Henry, and a 2-month-old daughter named Elisa. Dave was a wonderful uncle. Henry shares the same love of trains that Dave had as a boy. During his trips to Ann Arbor, Uncle Dave jumped right back into childhood and would play with Henry for hours at a time. Henry treasured these visits. He could feel Dave's warmth, and he was drawn to him. He said that Uncle Dave was his best friend in the whole world. This past Thanksgiving, we were so thrilled that Dave could be here with me and Sarah to celebrate the holiday and hold our newborn child the very next day. Our hearts are broken that Henry and Elisa won't get to know their Uncle Dave, but we will keep his memory alive with them by telling stories of his life and the inspiration we draw from him. Dave, we are devastated that our time with you has ended, and we miss you so much already. We will cherish your memory and inspiration for the rest of our lives. We hope that you have found a place where you can find eternal peace and happiness.
In the time that I was able to spend with David's family and learning about his relationship with you, Abe, it would be, I think, not enough to just say that you were friends. It seemed like you were truly brothers. And so we invite you now to the Bima.
A couple of years ago, I watched my dad do this for his Dave. And his Dave lived to be 79. I'm Abe. I'm Dave's best friend and primary artistic partner. We were best friends for 20 years. When I married my love, Gail, Dave made the most gorgeous speech, so specific and uninhibited in declaration of love for me that I still hear about it even from people who weren't there. I was in a bar once and someone I didn't know told me they heard that the greatest speech of all time was given at my wedding by my best friend. A few years later, I was with Dave in Bratislava in one of the greatest and most impactful of our late night end up seeing the sunrise talks. I talked about being jealous because I hadn't had a forum to pour out my Dave love and show it to an entire room of people. The way Dave had gotten to do about me. It's one of my greatest sources of anguish in this new reality of crushing absurdity. That this is when I get to do it. My heart is shattered by this symmetry. But because Dave got to speak directly to me, I'm going to speak directly to Dave. Dave, I pledge to myself that today, even though I feel like I've had my guts ripped clean out of my body with no warning, I would live in, bask in the sweet light of your joy. Because you were a person of consummate joy. And no matter how it ended, I'm not letting anyone out of this room until they can feel it with me. You were completely guileless, which cuts both ways. Sure, this means you didn't expect people to lie, to take advantage, and that could hurt. But it means you also didn't receive anything positive with a sense of expectation or mundanity. When you were given something as simple as a carton of blueberries or a sincere compliment, the excited little child in you would jump into your face and radiate through the Dave grin that we all knew. The sides of your mouth would spread wide and flare up, and you'd close your eyes, and you'd just give yourself entirely to that moment of pleasure. In my darkest moments over the last week, I've tried to return to your grin, to close my eyes and see you. Sometimes I can't, and it hurts. Right now, sometimes all I can see is the slow churning of time, the glowering stare of the decades that I'm now going to have to spend without you. But I hope that as I rebuild my inner peace, your smile is the mortar that holds it together. Dave, I have always chased you. So many things about us were similar. Our obsessiveness, but you were a little more obsessive. Our unwillingness to... Thanks for laughing. It's really helping me. Our unwillingness to capitulate or compromise our beliefs, but you were a little more uncompromising. Our intellect, but you were smarter. By a lot. And even with music, I mean, you were the perfectionist. You were the one who said, no, we have to work on it a little bit longer. We have to fix it. When I go off script, that's what's going to happen. And without you, my life would have been so comparatively boring. At my very core, I'm the kid in the movie who says, I don't know, guys, we're going to get in trouble. And that's why, even though I'm older, I was the sidekick. If we, for instance, managed to get our hands on a raw squid in high school, you were the one who would end up walking around downtown Ann Arbor with it hanging out of your mouth. And I would be the one walking next to you and laughing at people's reactions. Yes, this happened. Jordan, we got it from Mongolian barbecue. I was forever running behind you to catch up, eating your dust. And I'm so glad that I kept chasing. I think I turned out to be brave, and that's because you made me brave. I'm not afraid to get in trouble anymore, because I got to be your friend. And I will walk on and carry your fearlessness with me like a compass. So while my long life without you is going to be excruciatingly sad a lot of the time, I'm not worried that my life is going to be boring. I mean, I wore this shirt to a funeral. Of course, I'll talk about why later. But first, I'm going to let us laugh for a moment at what was probably the bravest thing that we ever did. This one I didn't write down. In 2005, I was at the Ann Arbor Art Fair, and I came to the nonprofit booth area, and there was one for the Mars Society. And this was basically an organization for people who want to colonize and live on Mars. And they were having a convention in like a week in Boulder, Colorado. And I called Dave, and I was just like, "You got these losers." And we went. We got in the car. We drove 18 hours straight through, always. And we went. We signed up. Anybody could just sign up, and so we bought tickets. We had lanyards. We were participants in this conference. But our goal was to disrupt. And I honestly can't say most of the things in this forum that we did and said. But just picture Dave cracking open a Bud Light in the middle of a symposium and raising a hand to say absolutely ridiculous stuff just to derail this goofy thing. And again, Dave was so brave, and I just sat next to Dave laughing my ass off. And but the big moment, though, at the convention was we found out that there was a song competition. Now, this competition, it turned out, unfortunately, it turned out that you couldn't enter the competition now because it was the kind of thing you sent in advance, and it was more like a winner's showcase where the people who placed high in it would play. But we were determined, and so we begged, and we found a person in charge of it, and we begged, and the guy was like, "Well, okay, we can't put you in the competition night, but if you show us your song, we'll let you play at the banquet." And so we were like, okay, well, we don't have to each other, we could always mind meld and make a decision together without having to talk about it. We could always play off each other. And so we said, okay, no problem. We're just going to go back to the hotel, get the guitar, and bring it back and play the song. But actually, we went back to our car, which was parked right outside, had the guitar in it, and we sat in it and wrote this. Oh, I'm just going to play the chorus, because this is the good one. We needed a good song. And we wrote this in 5 minutes. I didn't practice this in the piano, and I'm more of a guitarist. The cello do it slower, and then use your key. 'Cause it's so beautiful up there, on the frontier, so far away from here, I can almost taste it. Beautiful up there, so damn we can. The power's in our hands, it's just one round trip away. But these are the verses. And of course, because most of these people were scientists who were hobbyist musicians, and we were two burgeoning professional musicians, the guy loved it and said, okay, you can perform in the competition. So of course what we did was we can perform at the banquet. So of course what we did was go home and stay up all night writing a really obscene rap. I'm not going to do it. If you want the blue material, catch me sometime later. But we spent the whole we spent the whole night writing it. Went to bed at 6 a.m. Slept all day, and showed up for the banquet. And we played it to a room of 250 people. And the ending was just bye, and we ran out of the room and drove back to Ann Arbor. So I'm going to talk to Dave again. Together, Dave, we were wild. We drove through 48 states together and probably spent an aggregate 6 months on the road. When you add up all the trips, usually driving all night and seeing the sun peek out before we packed it in. But then we were driving because we were running from something, and we moved to New York to put it behind us. We got serious about our art, and we didn't often want to drive anymore, and that was okay. We found new ways to be wild together, most of all through our music making, but our art was, in the end, our work. And that wasn't enough, which is why I'm not really talking about it here today. So we had to put that road trip wildness somewhere else. And in the last couple years, it turned out to be dancing together, which we did in dark, loud, crowded rooms in the middle of the night for the last year and a half of our time together, starting in Prague and Berlin, but continuing at home. My dear Dave, the last time I saw you, we danced all night. I was wearing this, so I wore it today. We always moved around the dance floor independently, coming together for moments, but mostly dancing individually. You didn't know, I never told you this, but sometimes I would stand back and watch you, awestruck by your freedom and your fire. Every time we went out together, I would take you in a little bit. That last night, I danced in the back for a little while, watching you and feeling that same old sense of chasing, of wanting to be more like you, fearless, a searcher of intensity and passion. I will keep dancing for you. Really though, your wild side was your public face that many here and elsewhere knew, and I could filibuster us all the way to the summer if I told every outlandish story about you. I'm sure that as we who love you try to heal, we will find that these stories are a kind gift from you. I know we will always tell them, and that we will feel the warm waters of laughter and gratitude and forgiveness bathing our forever wounds. But I need people to hear about the you that only a few of us saw. The private, just for intimate friends, Dave. That's the part of you that I already loved so much that it hurt a little. Now it makes me inconsolable to think about it because I can't believe you're gone. I can't believe I have to go on without Dave, the dear, sweet little lamb. You were so soft and circumspect, and when you looked at us, your dear ones, you always believed us to be good. My soul felt so beautiful in your eyes, and you treated it with such care. We looked at a painting together in Vienna when you were trying to help me see that Renaissance art isn't boring. It was of the Archangel Michael in a column of glowing light, in a graceful pose, reaching up to the sky, but standing atop a sea of wretchedness, pain, violence. The painting made you cry, and I saw you see yourself in it. In the eyes of your inner child, you wanted to be graceful and shining and small like a wisp of the painted figure's golden hair, dancing in the wind like a translucent jellyfish gliding through the water, an ocean feature far and blurry, spinning in tiny circles. And you are, I love you, I love you, I love you. I've seen the sunrise so many times with you. You loved it and I hated it. For me, it was always the harsh, crusty setting in of reality after an all-nighter, because suffice it to say, with us it was always a still up for the sunrise, not got up for the sunrise situation. Whether we were entering our 20th consecutive hour of driving, or sitting on a Berlin subway with your head resting on my shoulder, this one, coming back for hours of dancing, or whether we had just talked in your room all night, you listening to me so patiently as I rambled, ranted, laughed, sobbed. The sun felt warming and crusty to you, and harsh and crusty to me. So when you died, I stayed up all night again. I had to. When the sun rose, snow was falling, and I took a walk outside and talked to you. Now I love the sunrise. I love it for you, with you. Dave, I will always look for you in the sunrise. I'll be watching you dance from a small distance back, chasing you like always, eating your dust. I love you, Dave, and I will make the rest of my life a song to you.
After hearing reflections from these three amazing people, truly three members of Dave's family, I stand before you today not to offer a full eulogy. I could not do justice, clearly, to Dave's life, to the complexity of who he was. For each of us, however, there are threads that wind their way through our lives, aspects of who we are, maybe the essence of who we are, that follows us from birth until death. And from what I've learned about David, about this beautiful soul, most of us probably couldn't speak of the fullness of this human being, this man who would venture to explore what most of us would shy away from. And the truth is, each one of us that knew David, each one of us that had our own experiences with him, who have our own stories and memories, intimacies, hold a piece of him. Of course, David was not just a complex person, he also left us in a complicated way. His death by suicide leaves us all shaken in a way that feels unique. In our culture, especially because of our mental health taboos, we have the tendency to turn death by suicide into something more tragic than other types of death. In doing so, we set suicide apart. It can become the focus. When a friend or family member dies from cancer after a long struggle with that cancer, we might stand on this bema and say, so-and-so fought so hard, but he lost his battle. A death from any other disease teaches us something about this moment as well. David was in pain. It was a pain that he lived with for many years. David fought so hard, but lost his battle. And certainly it is not David's death that sets him apart. It is the life he led. And knowing that his personal pain was a part of who he was, it's even more amazing that he lived the kind of compassion that defined much of his life. Even though David was quite poor, as we've already heard, living in New York, he would still give people money when asked. If there was someone playing an instrument in the subway station, Dave was likely to drop some money in her cup. Dave's kindness was pervasive. Even when bad things happened to him, he still found a way to be kind. While in college, studying at IU, Dave saw a man on the street who looked like he needed help. As he drew near, it became clear this guy was drunk. When most of us see drunk guys on the sidewalk, we do our best to avoid him. We cross the street. We avert our eyes. Not Dave. Dave went and helped him. And in the course of helping him, Dave got punched. But that punch couldn't knock the compassion out of him. David was different. Most of us spend our time sizing people up, making judgments about them based on ridiculous assumptions. David didn't do that. He never judged other people. He could talk to anyone even when he had nothing in common with them. He would meet people where they were. No, we must thrust away the compulsion to focus on David's death, because it is not his death that was exceptional, it was his life. It was his kindness, his compassion, his originality. These things and more are what make his loss so tragic. In this week's Torah portion, we come across a famous expression. After leaving Egypt and crossing the sea, the Israelites are approaching the moment when they will receive the Ten Commandments at Mount Sinai. God assures the Israelites that they will become a Mamlechet Kohanim ve'Goy Kadosh, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Kodesh, holiness, is one of the most fascinating concepts in Judaism. We often think of something or someone that is holy as delicate, untouchable. A holy object or person seems beyond us, something or someone that we must keep some distance. But in Jewish tradition, that is not quite what holiness is about. Holiness in Judaism is that which is different, other than everything else. Holiness is separateness, self-differentiation. As I have come to learn about David, that is what comes to mind. He may not have been a religious person, but David was a holy person. From his earliest years, he had the uncanny ability to set himself apart, whether through music or kindness or encyclopedic knowledge of random topics. David had the courage to be the person he truly was. David was an Ish Kodesh, a holy person. Zichrono Livracha. May his memory be forever a blessing. As we begin to conclude our service, we will continue with the El Malei Rachamim prayer, a prayer that asks God to hold on to David, to grab his soul, to bind him up in eternal life. Please rise if you're able.
El Malei Rachamim Shochin Bamromim Hametzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShechinah Im Kedoshim Utehorim Kzohar Haraki Amasirim Et Nishmat Yosef ben Shoshana V'Reuven Shehalach Leolamo Bal Harachamim Yastirehu Beseter Knafav Leolamim Vitzror Bitzror HaChaim Et Nishmato Adonai Hu Nachalato V'yanuach B'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar Amen.
May the source of life, the fountain of all being, open our hearts to compassion and our eyes to wisdom, that we might glimpse in perfect peace and sadness the way of all things. May David's memory be for us a blessing, and may we never let the light of his love grow dim in our hearts. May we remember all his worthy and righteous deeds, that his memory be forever bound up in the bond of life. God is our source and our destination, our beginning and our end. May David's death awaken us to this truth, that the bond of love we shared and share not be severed in sorrow. May he rest in peace, and together we say, Amen. Please be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, there may be a little bit of problems at the cemetery. So when we get to the cemetery, we're going to stop on level ground so we can make sure the cars can get up to the gravesite after there's a little bit of a hill there. We want to make sure everybody is safe before we get out of their cars. So just when we get to the cemetery, please follow our lead. And if you could, hold yours when we get out to the vestibule to do this.
Just in case people had a hard time hearing that, when we get to the cemetery, if you are joining us at the cemetery, please stop on flat ground so that if there are problems with ice, that there is less of a chance of slipping. And pallbearers will meet you in the vestibule. Please, if you are a pallbearer, please join in the vestibule.
Thank you.